Good evening, comrades. On behalf of Marxist Study Group CPM Karnataka, I welcome you all to today's session on the history of communist movement in Karnataka. We have with us Comrade Prakash, who has done his doctoral studies on the subject from the Kannada University in Hampi. This particular lecture is part of a lecture series that we are planning to conduct under the platform of Marxist Study Group. Marxist Study Group has been formed to educate ourselves about the Marxist-Leninist ideology, as well as to educate ourselves about the condition of the working class. And as most of us here are coming from different parts of the country, it is important for us to understand what are the conditions that prevail here, and also understand how our comrades have led the struggle of the working class here. Um, I have to flag a couple of things before we start the session. One, if you have any comments or if you would like to make any intervention, there's a comment box there. If you could type in that, we can read of the comments at the end of the session. I hope that's fine with Dr. Prakash. Comrade Prakash?
Yes, comrade.
Okay. I'll invite now Comrade Vasant, who would give us a brief introduction to the session and also introduce Comrade Prakash. Comrade Vasant is a state committee member.
Good evening, everybody, comrades. This is going to be a series of lectures on communist movement in Karnataka. As you know, this October, communist movement in India completed 100 years. And but for the COVID pandemic issues, it should have been celebrated in a very big way in terms of remembering the entire 100 years of communist movement in the country, as well as what are the various stages it went through and all that. So remember fighters and also the major struggles and all that. Partly it has been done through books and articles and some lectures here and there. State Committee of CPM itself conducted this lecture by Prakash in Kannada last year as part of the celebrations. However, for a larger audience, it was felt that we should talk about history of communist movement. History of communist movement in India itself is, I think, not recorded so well, except that we have some major struggles like Telangana, or things like that, and later struggles. But there is no one comprehensive history of communist movement in the country. There are a lot of materials. Many major leaders have written about their stories, the CMS, AKG, so many of them, all put together, we get some picture. But in the Karnataka, it was even much less. Communist movement in Karnataka is much less documented, talked about, and on. So it's very important that we have a series of lectures. And it is quite pleased to have Dr. Prakash with us, who has worked, maybe, I don't know any other state where a person has worked on a communist movement's history. Perhaps it is must be unique. So we are lucky to have him here, and he has done the study. And as you know, submitting a PhD means to do thorough study, not just sources from the party itself, but also from all other sources available. And several interviews looking at various government sources and so on and so forth. They have done a thorough lecture. In terms of communist movement in Karnataka itself, if I can say a few things. Obviously, it didn't start in 20s, 21, let's say. It was a communist movement in overall India. It started a little later. I'm sure Prakash will tell you more about it. Sometime in mid-30s, And as you also know that Karnataka was not as it is today, one political area. It was divided into at least 4 or 5. Part of it was under, western part was under Bombay and Madras presidency. Some of it was under Mysore Raja, and some of it was under Hyderabad, Karnataka, Hyderabad Nizam's rule, and several other smaller principalities and all that. So that itself meant that it was not starting from similar. So, but the very moment in Madras presidency, particularly Malpad district, did impact our then South Canara district, today Udupi and South Canara. And North Canara was part of the Bombay presidency, Dharwar and so many, whatever we call it today, North Karnataka. Big chunk of it was part of the Bombay presidency. So there also there was some movement. And similarly in Mysore, particularly in KGF, working class struggles are recorded as early as 30s, mid-30s. And the communist movement also started. And also apart from that, there are some intellectual groups which were working in Mysore and Bangalore particularly. I'm not sure about Dharwad, maybe also. And so on, so forth. But particularly Mysore and Bangalore. So these form various trade union movement and actual workers movements in coastal Karnataka and then Bombay Karnataka and parts of KGF and Bangalore also obviously. And later Davangere and all that. So these were the nucleus of communist movement. And this communist movement is definitely not recorded enough. I think we have some sources in terms of 2-3 leaders who wrote their biography in detail, particularly the Kakilaya. I think Somson. Prakash, what is this? What is his name? Simpson Soms.
Yeah.
So those two were slightly detailed, accounts, but otherwise it's scattered in terms of what is generally recorded is Communist Party's role in the unifying Karnataka Ekikarana movement, it's called. So there it is fairly well recorded. Otherwise, it is all bits and pieces, not many. Maybe the later ones are what we call the Naragunda Nalgunda revolt of peasants. There, it was led by communists. So that is fairly well recorded. But by and large, it is not well recorded. And also the connection. When you say history, there is a series of events and also the connection, how it developed, what were the issues, what are its achievements. All this is not recorded. And I'm sure Dr. Prakash will cover these in some detail. And from what I understand from him, it could take about 5 sessions, let's say 45 minutes to 1 hour. And first 2 sessions, today and tomorrow, I think he will try to cover pre-independence movement in some detail. And then later, let's say from 47 to 64 period, one session. And then 64 to end of 80s is another period. And later, basically what we call now globalization period or neoliberal period, 90s and onwards. So roughly 5 sessions, but depending on how it goes and all that, it may take 1 or 2 more or less. So that's I think broad introduction, and Dr. Prakash himself I think needs no introduction to this one. He joined the communist movement, through student movement. He was a student activist from 80s and early 90s and became a General Secretary of the Karnataka State Unit. And later joined the party as full-timer, and he was secretary of one of the largest district committees, Bangalore. And later he also was elected to the state committee. So he has been a communist leader for the last decades now. And also he is active in the trade union, particularly in the transport sector recently. Worked in other trade unions earlier. So he has both the experience of organizing workers and peasants as well as communist movement per se in terms of running the party, political family. And I think he is one of the administrators who also writes lectures and studies. He is involved with not only communist movement, but many other issues. So it will be a very rich experience of him sharing his study and his in-depth study of the. It is going to. I should also tell you that it's going to be published as a book in Kannada. Whatever his PhD thesis was, it will be a book form. It's likely to be released in the upcoming state conference of CPA and so that will also give you some information. Hopefully, sometime later it will be translated. So now, go to Prakash.
Comrade Vasant?
Yeah, I am done.
Okay. Comrade Prakash.
Okay. Thank you, comrades. So, initially, I thank the Marxist study group, which has organized this lecture series to know a little about the history of communist movement in Karnataka. So I don't want to go into the background and other things in a detailed manner. Yes, Vasant has already noted. Today and tomorrow in these two sessions, I will try to cover the history of communist movement in pre-independence period. So, as far as possible, I will conclude it by two sessions of the pre-independence period. And as he also said that post-independence period history, I will try to deal with in another sessions, which we will decide in future. Okay, anyhow, I will begin without going much into other things. Communist movement in Karnataka, when compared with Bombay, Calcutta, Madras or Lahore, began late in Karnataka. Prior to the formation of Karnataka state on linguistic basis, it was subjected to the rule of Mysore and Hyderabad princely states and the British provinces of Madras and Bombay, Coorg state, and some independent states inside Karnataka. It can be observed that in all these regions, communist movement, as also struggle for independence, took place at different levels. In this lecture, we shall discuss the way in which communist movement was shaped in various regions and provinces of Karnataka in the pre-independence period. The first person to sow the seeds of communism in Mysore province was C.B. Monnaya. He is called Chekkera Biddappa Monnaya, C.B. Monnaya, from Kodagu. He discontinued his education to take part in the non-cooperation movement, for which resulted in his being jailed in Karwar and Bijapur. He was again arrested in 1933 and later came in contact with EMS Namboodiripad. In 1936, he attended Lucknow Congress as a volunteer, where he got a copy of the Communist Manifesto. In 1936, when he visited Bangalore, he had made an arrangement for his stay with Samprati Srikant, who was his co-prisoner in Kannanur jail. Later on, Monnaya evinced interest in the political developments of Mysore. He was jailed in Mysore and Bangalore for violating rules of exile. Further, he came in contact with Lakshman Modaliyar in KGF jail and through him tried to secretly organize workers. During the Second World War, a Mysore conspiracy case was slapped on him for an anti-war agitation. Monnaya, who was the first accused in this case, and he had to undergo an imprisonment for 2.5 years. As Dr. Ayar Assaranna, a prominent trade union leader and a freedom fighter from Kodagu, says, Munnaya was a freedom fighter, communist, and also a frontline leader of the Karnataka unification movement. K. Srinivas Murthy of Mysore was Munnaya's companion in Karwar jail. By that time, it is said that they were already in touch with the banned Communist Party. K. Srinivas Murthy, in consultation with Munnaya, had come to the conclusion that the first unit of Communist Party should be formed in Mysore province. Two more friends joined them in this venture. This is how C.B. Munnaya, K. Srinivas Murthy, Ananta Subbarao, and S.V. Narayana Murthy, by the end of November 1936, formed underground the first unit of Karnataka's Communist Party of India, that is CPI. The British had banned the Communist Party, and as such, these activities could not resort to any overt action. However, they were enthusiastic about taking communist ideology to the people and building the Communist Party. It was when they were planning such activities under proscription that the incident of an aged man's marriage happened. They decided to begin their activities by opposing this marriage. A considerable number of people were attracted because of this incident, but since the prominent among them came together and started Janajagruti Sangha in Kannada, it is called. It is called also Mass Awakeners Union. The activities of Mass Awakeners Union have evolved from three different understandings, as it is suggested by Janaki Nair, a historian, concentrating primarily on students and workers and involving in agitation and propaganda to function as a pressure group within the Congress. That was one angle. And as against the strength and hegemonic methods of the Congress is the second aspect. And developing a democratic alternative in the working class organizations was the third understanding. An important aspect of such an understanding was nationalistic political perspective of Mysore. The driving force behind the socio-economic modernization was the Mysore state itself. And almost there was no ideological opposition by the Congress to such a perspective of development. There was the possibility of any political activity against the British colonial rule being construed as an attack on the rule of colonial Maharaja. It is for this reason that when the influence of non-cooperation movement and some of the Mysore province, such people are being sent to Bombay province for training and to carry out activities. Some of these came in contact with communalists in jails. N.D. Shankar, C.B. Munnaya, S. Ramaswamy, K.S. Kumaran, N.N. Chandur, K.R. Srinivas Murthy, and other educated youngsters had their political apprenticeship in the non-cooperation movement. The constructive program of the Congress did not enthuse them anymore. Several doubts were developed on the goal of bourgeois nationalists of the Congress. Hence, these started working among students and workers, primarily concentrating in Bangalore. Young men felt Congress socialism and constructive activities, and working independently came together and were planning to give an organizational framework to their activities. As I earlier said, the incident of a 65-year-old widower Kalappa's marriage with a 17-year girl came to the fore. On May 19, 1937, about 500 people gathered, including some Congress supporters, at Banappa Park in Bangalore. Many people know that today Banappa Park is one of the center for many activities and protest programs even today. Further, this meeting resolved that any man above the age of 50 should not be allowed to marry a woman below 25 to 35 years of age. Encouraged widow marriage. There should be freedom of speech to the public, etc. These were the demands they formulated. They decided that an organizational structure was required to effectively function for the fulfillment of their goals and formed the Mass Awakeners Union. The subsequent meetings discussed the starting of several organizations in different areas and decided to float National Youth League, Civil Liberties Union, Malleshwaram Laborers Club, and such organizations. In the backdrop of Brahmin and non-Brahmin animosity that was intense in Mysore province, they started a campaign for responsible government. Thousands of copies of 28-point booklet written by K. Srinivas Murthy were distributed. Navajivana newspaper reprinted the same and praised the Mass Awakeners Union. Within a few days of its coming into being, its footprints were created in the city. In addition to these activities, evening study groups were organized for the students. The readings of left literature and translation were also organized. Narayana Murthy, C.V. Monnaya, K. Srinivas Murthy, and S.V. Ramanna were actively involved in popularizing communist in Bangalore, Mysore, and Bhadravati. Monnaya was one of those that evinced interest in forming a workers' union after 1940 in KGF for first time. Even prior to this, N.N. Chendur and Dr. Rangaswamy had actively participated in the strike of tobacco factory situated in the civil and military station area of Bangalore, that is called cantonment area of Bangalore. They involved themselves in organizing workers, supplying food to the families of striking workers, ensuring that the strike news was published in the newspapers. Congress withdrew from this struggle as it did not find it politically beneficial. Left forces could have consolidated themselves among the working classes through independent interventions. But the national and international developments forced the leftists to succumb to the pressures of forming a united democratic front. Such a working strategy had borne sufficient fruits among the workers, peasants, and students and intellectuals elsewhere in the country. Mass Awakeners Union has been formed by including the young and radical forces inside the Congress to activate and strengthen the Congress and in the state. Since main Congress is not strong enough, the formation of Congress Socialist Party has been delayed. Meanwhile, Mass Awakeners Union will spread socialist thoughts. The summary of this communication sent by K. Srinivas Murthy, Secretary of Mass Awakeners Union, to the Indian National Congress reflects the stand of the organization. Therefore, Mass Awakeners Union gave importance to independent activities. Monnaya played the prominent role in organizing a protest in 1937 against the visit of Viceroy Linlith Gow. The same year, Nariman, a famous Congress leader from Bombay, visited Bangalore, which witnessed called Gundappa. For launching a campaign to raise funds for the deceased family, Monnaya was exiled once again. In August of the same year, Andaman Day was observed demanding the release of soldiers from Andaman. And the same day for student protests in association with National Youth League to mark State People Day in the defenses of kings. S.V. Srinivas Murthy and Savai Ashwatrao jailed for 10 days. By 1938, the government had concluded that Mass Awakeners Union was a unit of the Communist Party. Diwan of Mysore banned the organization in the state of Mysore. Members of Mysore State Mass Awakeners Union, N.D. Shankar and his two friends T.S. Subbanna, M.N. Rajshekhar, as also as Ramaswamy, were banned by the government from addressing the public. The leaders of Mass Awakeners Union had made known their intentions of revolutionizing Congress were looked upon with suspicion by the Congress leaders. They were afraid of functioning with Congress revolutionaries. Kengal Hanumantayya had written to N.D. Shankar that he was ineligible to attend as a delegate to the Tripuri session of AICC for not wearing khadi. N.D. Shankar protested against this and wore khadi for 10 years, saying that he would ignore his personality for a great cause. Whatever may be, the Mass Awakeners Union exhibited its pro-communist stand on several occasions. It observed Communist Day and May Day and also attempted to hoist hammer and sickle flags. In the middle of 1913, S. Ramaswamy convened Karnataka Socialist Convention to face the increasing attacks by the Congress. A small meeting was held despite restraints of the Mysore state. N.D. Shankar, K.S. Kumar and S. Ramaswamy and others were arrested on the anti-national charges and subjected to rigorous imprisonment for 2 years. The leaders of the Mass support that Hindu communalism was getting within the Congress. Shankar wrote an open letter in this regard in the Tainadu newspaper. He said that Ramlal Tiwari must be expelled from Congress because of his links with the Hindu Mahasabha and Aryan Defense League. But it did not happen. Instead, KB Srinivasu was prevented from representing Mysore Congress, accusing him of being left revolutionary. Hindu communalism was deep-rooted in the Congress in this manner. Similarly, the fact that many Congress leaders were factory owners and ideological differences arose between Congress and communists for they were ignoring the issues of the workers. There was no hard pressure regarding the implementation of laws pertaining to labor unions. The attitude of the Congress leaders, including K.T. Bhashyam. K.T. Bhashyam was a very big Congress leader of Mysore province then. K.T. Bhashyam was to be vocal in favor of the workers outwardly, although fundamentally not affecting the class interest of the mill owners. This attitude in some Congress leaders has its roots mainly because they themselves being the owners of the mills, and besides, Congress was getting funds from mill owners and capitalists. Hence, it should be observed that Congress trade union leaders made use of the labor unions and for reasons of anti-imperialism and not critical working class. The mini mill struggle illustrates when the workers considered the mass awakeners union as a substitute against such methods of the Congress, as against the linking of 6 months bonus to companies' profit by mini mill management. The workers resorted to strike for third time. The bill workers invited N.D. Shankar, K.S. Kumaran, and M.S. Rao Rao on 20th January to take complete leadership of the strike, despite all assurances of the Diwan and the Congress. They constituted a struggle committee of 40 people with N.D. Shankar as the secretary and successfully conducted 25-day strike. The strike that ended on 20th February resulted in the union being recognized. In the backdrop of war and keeping with the government of India order, the princely state of Mysore exiled 3 communist leaders for a period of 1 year. At this time, K.T. Bhashyam again brought to the fore the question of cooperation between the workers and the owners and ended the strike. However, notwithstanding the assurance of Bhashyam, the Billy Bill workers struck work in June 1941. N.D. Shankar, on being exiled, went to Bhadravati and organized the workers of Mysore paper mills and Mysore iron and steel works. This Mysore iron and steel works, today it is called VISL, Vishweshwaraya Iron and Steel Works. He organized a strike to protest against the death of a cleaner, Chinnappa, in the mill. Shankar was arrested in this case in 1941. The strike did not end, instead continued. Protests took place demanding the release of Shankar in Bhadravati, Bangalore and Mysore. As a consequence of all these, Mysore Labour Act was implemented in 1941 to legalize the trade unions. The implementation of such an act is projected by Congress as its own achievement. As a matter of fact, the militancy of Mass Awakeners Union, different style of leadership, the struggle during 30s and 40s in KGF, all put together not only terrified the government of Mysore, even the Congress. This was implemented in such a manner as not to jeopardize the existing echelons of power, to facilitate the non-conflicting relations between capital and labor, and making these things easy for Congress to play its role in it. The actives started becoming weak during the process of Quit India movement. Though MAU was popular among the masses, it was organizationally weak. Number of people involved in it were very few, but they were attracted by left ideology. Their understanding of the ideology was liberal in character. Therefore, it failed to cultivate a socialist political culture. Institutional weakness coupled with the endless tyranny of the government had its effect. Due to this, many among them gradually drifted to other fields. During the Second World War, Subhash Chandra Bose had joined hands with fascist Germany and Japan as part of his opposition to the British, and this stand of Bose was opposed by the CPI. For this reason, K.S. Kumaran abdicated the CPI and was for some time in forward bloc, and later joined the Congress in 1944 and turned as a rabid anti-communist. S. Ramaswamy withdrew from the political scene. N.D. Shankar was not satisfied with the stand taken by CPI during the Quit India movement, and he kept himself away from the Communist Party when it was founded. Despite the continuous efforts of Monnaya to take him a party old-timer, Shankar did not budge. Savai Ashwath Rao and N.N. Chindu were the main organizers of Radical Democratic Party founded by M.N. Roy. Of the leaders of MAU, only C.V. Monnaya and M.S. Ramarao continued their activities in the newly formed Communist Party under the leadership of N.L. Upadhyaya in 1942. Thus, MAU failed in developing anti-hegemonic culture. Its political efforts remained under the shadow of bourgeois nationalists. Mysore police has estimated this development as under. There is little that is common between Mysore communists and the CPI. There are no attempts at transforming the Congress into a socialist or communist organization. So this we can attempt to understand in the background of a socialist party entirely converting into communist party in Kerala under the leadership of EMS. What had happened in Karnataka that we can understand from this incident. If one examines the range and influence of MAU and that had leftist background, perhaps communist movement in Karnataka could have got a different beginning had it got the required perspective from the arrival of N.L. Upadhyaya to Bangalore in 1942, that communism obtained a proper form in the Mysore province. He had been arrested and jailed for staging an anti-war protest in 1940. On account of his change in the stand regarding the war, he was released in 1942. Later, on the suggestion of the Central Committee of the CPI, he came to Bangalore in September 1942 to build the party in Karnataka. He started the Communist Party office in a small building at KV Temple Street near Majestic, that is in Sultanpet. There was nothing suggestive of a party here at the time, but there was a small group comprising Monnaya, N.D. Shankar, M.S. Rao. There were also a few in the MAU. N.D. Shankar had resigned from the party. M.S. Ramarao was arrested and kept in central jail. Hence, there was mostly no one when N.L. Upadhyaya came here and everything had to be started anew. Upadhyaya could not be with the Congress had it had been abandoned. Students came in contact when he undertook party literature campaign. Gradually, textile workers and KGF workers came into contact. Then came M.S. Krishnan. By then, workers of Binni Mill, Raja Mill and Minerva Mills had formed unions. All these unions were under the Congress control. Upadhyaya came in contact with a small ginger group, which was very active in Raja Mill. So, through these, who started coming and some old members of union was formed in Raja Mill with Upadhyaya as president. On similar lines, N.L. Upadhyaya made attempts to the party in other mills and factories also. In 1943, Upadhyaya decided that Communist Party should organize a protest to demand the release of Congress leaders who had been arrested during the Quit India movement and for the establishment of national government. He was arrested and sent to central jail. He came into contact with several in the jail. Vajravelu and K. Sriramulu of Binni Mills were two of them. Upadhyaya made use of all these contacts to build the Communist Party. Similarly, contacts from Shivamogga, Davanagere, Tumakuru and Mysore also developed. But the strongest group was in KGF. It was only because of this that the Communist Party could get its first legislator elected in the general elections in the post-independent India. M.S. Krishnan, who had completed his engineering education, was initiated into trade union movement. The proprietors of Krishna Mill did not want Krishnan to be elected. This union was under the grip of Congress for a long time, but this election, both the winners were communists. Different styles of communist functioning can be seen here. Leaders visited the homes of workers and would discuss with them. The communists gained the confidence of the workers as the former. Besides fighting for the demands of the union, simultaneously worked hard to solve the household problems of the latter. By 45-46, preparations were underway for the struggle regarding responsible government. Rising simultaneously the twin issues of responsible government and base discrimination and organizing a successful month-long railway strike in October and November in 1947 was an important struggle of that time by the communists. Opposing the vileness and hostility of the Diwan, 11,000 employees of the Mysore State Railway emerged victorious in getting bonus as also against their harassment. Arkat Ramaswamy Mudaliar, the Diwan Mysore let loose fierce attacks on the strikers. Some went underground, many were jailed. However, the workers stood their ground and struck work. They succeeded in making the workers realize that there was a direct relationship between the coming over of a responsible government with the removal of the feudal monarchy and the realization of their demands. It can be observed here that the communists had functioned providing a proper perspective of equating the workers' struggles with the national struggles. Upadhyaya, while coordinating his contacts, came in contact with India's famous atomic scientist Dr. Homi Jahangir Baba in IISc, Bangalore. Upadhyaya used to send parties literature to him. Baba was in the habit of reading CPI's weekly People's War. A Friends of Soviet Union had been started, including another famous Indian scientist, Dr. Satish Dhawan, who was in IISc at that time. He was a very good. It was a very famous, very good group functioning in the institute. Dr. Homi Baba was greatly instrumental in building the party. I have been given to understand that Homi Baba had personally paid a visit to the Communist Party office, Undivided Communist Party office in Sultanpet, Bangalore, and donated few benches and tables, which are still in the Communist Party office exist. This was made known to me by Comrade P.K. Subramani, who had been a worker in Raja Mill and later became the secretary of CPIM in Bangalore. The contact with Dr. Baba was lost after he went to Bombay to take charge of building the Atomic Research Center there. The style of functioning of the communist was not restricted to mere economic issues. It can be seen that works. Their style of functioning in the colonies of Bangalore's mill workers is very noteworthy. A majority of the workers of Mysore mill then lived in Swatantrapalya. This Swatantrapalya now lies around the Mantri Mall in Malleshwaram. There was a slum between Mysore mill and railway line, while one more was situated in Malleshwaram 5th class. There were about 200 deaths in a place called Pit Colony. This was a strong base of the communists. Besides imparting adult education, a night school and a library were also run there. A small sports club had also been started. Red flags would be hoisted in all huts on May Day. Domestic quarrels on account of alcoholism had to be resolved. Similar activities could be seen in KGF also. Gauramma, the wife of M.S. Ramarao, had taken upon herself the task of education in the labor colonies. She would teach, especially the women laborers, alphabet on the one hand and teaching them in Kannada on the other. The communist movement, as a very well organized workers' movement, first began in the KGF. It was here that the communist movement expanded and found its deep roots. Workers had to work for 10 to 12 hours a day, that too deep under the earth in KGF, which was started in 1880. Their dwelling places could only be called houses. There was no job security. Workers were not treated humanly. The dissatisfaction of the workers had begun to harden against this. Their wrath just needed an opportunity to explode. Lakshman Mudaliar and R.R. Shenmugam, both workers and leaders, had been exiled and jailed in Bangalore on the charges of instigating the workers to resort to strike. These two contacted N.L. Upadhyaya. At the same time, in 1943, it was decided to field A.P. Vajravelu Chettiar, a communist, in the elections to Mysore Mines Union, which had been declared. Ironically, he was arrested on 29th in another case and sent to jail. A substitute was found in V.M. Govindan, who was a very popular communist leader. The communists triumphed in the election, defeating P.R.K. Sharma, said to be pro-management. What draws our attention about the centers of communist struggle beyond the province of Mysore are the undivided South Canara and Ballari districts under Madras province. Both are geographically unconnected. Struggles of the communist movement and development from a historical perspective are totally different. Migrant Malayali workers had settled down in Mangalore and Udupi regions. Through them, the influence of communists of Malabar and the South Canara districts was pronounced. These workers had contacts with the Communist Party of Malabar. These were instrumental in sowing the seeds of communism among the workers of South Canara district And they were the ones who took the initiative of building the Communist Party in Mangalore and coastal areas, particularly South Canara district. Trade union was growing in the midst of BD workers, weavers, printing press and transport workers. Communist students also had a role in this. In the beginning, the leaders of the Congress Socialist Party played a role in the growth of unions. Because of the style of functioning of some leaders of the CSP, the struggles of printing and transport workers not only completely failed, but also slipped into the hands of the owners. In the years that followed, they got organized again under the leadership of the communists. At this juncture, A.K. Gopalan, famous for his peasant struggles, and his companions had escaped from Vellore jail and stayed in Mangalore for some time. This was also the time that witnessed the awarding of death sentence to 4 young communists in the Kayyur peasant uprising. C.M. Kuniraman, the manager of a printing press in Mangalore, was a communist. He was an underground supplier of books related to communist literature. People's War paper was also being used. In 1942, the Central Committee of CPI deputed N.L. Upadhyaya to Bangalore, as I already told. N.K. Upadhyaya was sent to Bijapur. He is the brother of N.L. Upadhyaya. And Shantaram Pai to Mangalore to build the party in these places. In the initial stages, K.A. Keralian, N.C. Shekhar, K.T. Raju, and others came to Mangalore from Kannanur and Calicut to extend help. P. Krishnapillai, E.M.S. Nambudripad, and others' guidance were also available then. In 1946, a unique struggle took place opposing a cut in government ration in South Canara. Public dissatisfaction has increased as the government had decreased the quantity of ration rice by 2 ounces in Malabar and South Canara districts. The itinerary of Sir Archibald Nye, the governor of Madras, had been announced at that time. He was scheduled to visit Mangalore and proceed further to Kannanur and Calicut and was to return to Madras via Shoranur. Krishnapillai's secret visit to Mangalore to stage a protest against this cut in ration rice had been announced. This was given a wide publicity secretly among the Communist Party workers and students. No factory functioned on that day of the governor's visit. Workers from all directions gathered at the Maidan, that's field, carrying sticks in their hands and red flags in their pockets. The slogan, "Let Nai," meaning dog, Nai, it's Archibald Nai. It's in Kannada, it is Nai. So the slogan, "Let Nai who has come go back, let rice come back," rented the hair. The scared police wielded lathis against all workers that came in sight. The workers tried to push back the police using the sticks. The police arrested all the leaders who were there at that time. More than 10,000 workers invaded the police station from all directions. The slogan, "Nai who has come go back, let rice come back and release the arrested leaders," rented the air again. The police and the district collectorate, finding no other ways, released the leaders. The district collector withdrew the order on the cut in ration rice. This struggle left an indelible mark on the minds of the people. The communists continued their struggles on the basis of people's problems. They decided to fight against price rise and shortage of food commodities. Their contention was that price rise was artificial and scarcity was created by businessmen and the officials. So the struggle against price rise and hoarding, they jumped into a direct action demanding that prices must be fixed in the case of rice and other food commodities. Rice was being transported from Bantwal, Udupi and Kundapur to Mangalore port in boats and carts for hoarding. Volunteers of the Communist Party would block the boats and carts midway, seize the hoarded rice bags and sell them to the public at fixed prices. It was clear that this was a planned action hoodwinking the police. Later on, the money would reach the actual owners of the stocks. This created a good public opinion about the Communist Party. Ultimately, this district collectorate had to intervene and make available to everybody 2 kgs of rice in any shop. This was made possible by more than 500 volunteers of the Communist Party through their supervision. In Bombay, Karnataka districts of Dharwad, Uttara Kannada, Bijapur and Belgaum, which had come under the influence of Bombay, which was the center of severe national movement. As per the directions of the Central Committee of CPI, N.K. Upadhyaya had come to Bijapur to build the party. By that time, N.M. Bal Singh Master, released from jail, also came. A history of technical relationship between Bijapur and well-known communist leaders can be discerned. Dr. Gangadhar Adhikari, one of the topmost communist leaders of the country, who had been subjected to circumscription by the British government in 1935, lived in Bijapur. He had his influence on some congressmen regarding communism. Later on, M.N. Roy, along with Congress socialists from Bombay, Maniben Kera, had stayed in the houses of Krishna Rao Kojalige, a Congress leader of Bijapur. Due to his influence, some had become Royists. So this can be connected in some way. You must remember that recently our Karnataka Chief Minister Basavaraj Bommai, it is told that his father S.R. Bommai, who was also the Chief Minister of Karnataka in 90s, that S.R. Bommai was a Royist. I don't know whether any link is there between this Royist group and S.R. Bommai, then I don't know. But in that area, that Royists were, some Royists were there because of M.N. Roy's stay at the Bijapur for some time. Demanding the Raw Committee recommendations and on the issues of DA, wage revision and retrenchments in 46-47 in Dharwad Hubli region. The All India Railwaymen's Federation had given a call for strike. In Hubli, the MSM railway workers struck work supporting the strike call. First branch of the Communist Party in Karnataka. Amir Haider Khan's meeting of P. Sundaraya at Kabban Park in Bangalore in 1931 and his attempt at making the latter a communist is a milestone in India's communist movement. The discussion these two had in Bangalore not only resulted in Sundaraya becoming a communist leader later, but also was responsible for attracting M.S. Nambudiri to the communist movement. But there was no information regarding anybody that could be called a communist in Bangalore at that time. Perhaps the Communist Party had no links here. Therefore, the meeting between Amir Haider Khan and Sundaraya in Bangalore did not gain any significance. K. Srinivas Murthy of Mysore was a companion of Monnaya in Karwar jail, as I already told. By that time, it is said the latter had links with the banned Communist Party. K. Srinivas Murthy, in discussion with Monnaya, decided to start a branch of the Communist Party in the province of Mysore. Two more friends joined this scheme. C.B. Monnaya, K. Srinivas Murthy, Anant Subbarao and S.V. Narayan Murthy thus met at Malleshwaram railway platform in Bangalore at the end of November 1936. They vowed to work under the guidance of the Communist Party and started a party cell. Thus, the first branch of the Communist Party in Karnataka was started in 1936 November. C.B. Monnaya was its first secretary. In various parts of Karnataka, there were units of the Communist Party at different levels and stages of formation. With a view to coordinate these units, a central committee of the party, perhaps by 1942, had organized an educational camp. This camp was organized to provide details about the change in the Second World War brought about by the intervention of Soviet Union. The need for developing a worker-peasant student struggle and coordination of party organization. In order to organize the activities of the Communist Party in the post-Second World War period, first conference of the Communist Party in 1946 was held at Davanagere. Karnataka Regional Committee of the Communist Party of India came into existence in this conference. N.L. Upadhyaya became the secretary of the Communist Party. Kulukunda Shivaraya, N.D. Shankar, S.N. Holla, Bal Singh Master of Bijapur and V.M. Govindan were the members of this committee. Of course, the names of the first Communist Party unit of Karnataka, there are some differences of opinion over there in that committee. Some give details about some other names. So anyhow, this first conference held in Davanagere in 46, and N.L. Upadhyaya became the first secretary of the CPI in Karnataka. Now I shall deal with some of the mass organizations that came up during this period in overall Karnataka. Now we shall deal on the founding of various mass organizations during national struggle and the earnestness of the Communist Party in enthusing the masses through struggles. First, I shall deal some of the developments regarding All India Kisan Sabha. Karnataka in the pre-independence period was entangled in separate land regulations. In addition to, and as a result of the struggle of warli tribes and other peasant struggles, it was possible to get a Tenancy Act in the Bombay province, which was different from Madras, Hyderabad and Mysore governments. Bombay province had Raitwari system. When the question of land ownership arose, big or huge landowners were not involved in self-cultivation. A large number of them had settled down in the urban areas. They owned Inam lands. Historically, Inam land was that which was gifted by the kings to their favorites in the pre-British periods. Strangely, even these landowners were considered peasants in the Raitwari system. In reality, these owners had leased their lands in small pieces to the tenants for cultivation. These were images of polygar or semi-polygar system of land ownership. In practice, lands possessed by zamindars only. Right from the time inauguration of AAKS in 1936, we have noted its decisions regarding founding of regional Kisan Sabhas in different parts of the country involving peasants in struggles. The first ever conference of AAKS held in 1936 was attended by Srimati Kamala Devi Chattopadhyaya and N.S. Ardikar representing Karnataka. It must be noted that Kamala Devi Chattopadhyaya was a very big Congress leader and later Congress Socialist Party leader, and N.S. Ardikar also was one of the leading Congress personality in northern, particularly Bombay, Karnataka region. So both attended the AAK's first conference, but no record or information is available regarding the activities of AAKs in Karnataka. However, it can be seen that Kamala Devi Chattopadhyaya had identified herself with the Kisan Sabha at the All India level. It can also be seen that Ardikar had labored hard to organize peasants to take part in the freedom struggle in Bombay, Karnataka. The possibilities of forming Kisan Sabhas in the Karnataka region were less. Nevertheless, the dynamic influence of Malabar Peasant Organization and Bombay Kisan Organization have been there on the regions of Karnataka. Thus, the effect of Malabar peasant struggle can be seen on South Canara. Similarly, as Bombay was the focal point of communist struggle, the peasant struggles of Bombay region can be seen in Uttar Kannada district. The post-independence period, the Telangana peasant struggle has influenced Kolar district. Seen in this backdrop, it can be concluded that the early peasant struggle of Karnataka in the pre-independence period under the communist leadership had begun in Uttar Kannada district of Bombay region. Prior to 1942, there was All India Kisan Sabhas committees in Mysore and Bombay, Karnataka regions. Since Kisan Sabha had laid emphasis on the formation of regional committees only on linguistic basis, AAK's Bombay Kisan Council meeting passed a resolution that these cannot be considered as independent regional committees. Swami Sahajananda Saraswati, General Secretary of AAKS, confirms this in a letter with the heading A Note to Regional Council dated 23/10/1942. But there was no success in this regard till the unification of Karnataka. Till the 10th All India Conference of AAKS, it can be seen that the central committees of Kisan Sabha had separately dealt with different regional committees. It can be observed that South Canara District Peasant Union, Bijapur District Peasant Union, Kolar District Peasant Union, and in Bangalore Union with KV Temple Street have been recognized in this manner. By March 1942, the membership of Karnataka Regional Kisan Sabha was 1,000 and that of Mysore region was 966. The leadership of AAKS is discussable with, even though there were separate struggles in different regions in Karnataka. The demands everywhere were by and large the same. Eviction from the lands, getting land to the tiller, abolition of tenancy, distribution of excess land, freeing peasant from debts, opposing oppression by zamindars, etc. were the issues of peasant struggles. AIK's endeavor to club all these issues with the freedom struggle. The districts of Uttara Kannada, Dharwad, Belgaum and Bijapur of Bombay government. Freedom movement in this region was very intense. Dinakar Desai of Uttara Kannada was in touch with servants of India in Bombay. Godavari Purulekar, a leader of the Communist Party, was also in it. She was a leader of the historic Warli tribal struggle. Warli struggle had its effect on Bombay, Karnataka regions too. The contacts of Godavari and Shamrao Purulekar had their leftist influence on Dinakar Desai, who took the initiative to organize the peasants. His peasant struggle could not take the shape of a strong anti-imperial struggle as it lacked the ideological basis of class struggle. In contrast to this, peasant struggles organized by the communists had the basis of class struggle. Dinakar Desai had started a peasants association in 1936. Continuing his activities through this entity, he organized Peasants Convention on 14th March 1940 in Ankola. Ankola is generally called the Bardoli of Karnataka, which is famous for salt satyagraha in this region. Implementation of Bombay Agricultural Loan Compensation Act 1939, peasants to stop paying the lease amount. If the above demand is not realized, reduction of lease amount to 1/3. In case the lease right is suspected for not paying the lease amount fully, nobody else should buy that land and lease were the demands raised. Ankola Taluk Peasant Association took its birth in this convention. The convention also accepted the red flag as the flag of the union. As a result of this, a district peasant convention was held in Ankola in 1940 May, attended by about 5,000 peasants. Alarmed by this, the Zamindari class lodged a complaint that Desai was a communist, that Dinakar Desai was a communist, conspiring against the British administration. An inquiry commission headed by Thakkar Bapa arrived to conduct the inquiry in this regard. Desai denied that he was a communist. However, the government of Bombay, disturbed by the intensity of the struggle, exiled Desai from the district for 5 years in 1940. Thereafter, Sheshagiri Pikale and Dayanand Nadkarni continued the struggle. What we can see here is that the caste and class that owned huge lands were on one side, and the landless or those who owned small pieces of land were on the other side. When the peasants of Siddhapura in Uttara Kannada district launched a struggle against payment of base amount, there was a split in the freedom struggle itself. Further, all the landowners complained to the Congress. Finally, a complaint also reached the British government. All these can be seen during the struggle against tax payment. This does not mean that there was a class consciousness among the peasants. It only says about the class character. Since 1920 itself, influenced by the communists, the peasants hailing from villages on either side of the river Kali were involved in small-scale struggles. Later on, these peasants came under the influence of AIKs. The same years, they stopped loading the yachts with lay at Trivali Post as a mark of protest in Karwar. The peasants raised the slogan. It's like this: land of the haves, land of the tiller, nature's bounty, river, forest belong to all. Oh British, quit India. Such slogans were very popular among the peasants during that time. Purushottama Jogi Naika, Syed Haidar and Abdul Hamid, who had come from this background and had a few others, were responsible for launching a unit of the Peasants Union affiliated to AIKs in 1937 at Halaga and Ulaga in Karwar. This is the first unit of AIKs in Karnataka that has begun in 1937. Later on, this was extended to form Peasants Union. Syed Haidar became the president, N.G. Malshekar the secretary, while Pursu Jogi Naika became the vice president. Even after the coming to power of the Congress government locally, a policy of taxing from 5 annas per head load of A and 1 rupee per load was implemented. Struggles were launched opposing this. Gradually, the peasant leaders got introduced to communism. The first peasants' convention was held at Ulaga in 1944 under the leadership of Maharashtra's Shamrao Purulekar. The second was held in 46 at Bada in Karwar. The third convention was held in 47 at Torak Bagh under the leadership of S.S. Mirajkar, who was a very leading communist from Bombay. Thousands of peasants had participated in these conventions. An explosive situation of peasant revolt was built up. The Tenancy Act of 1939, that was in existence in the Bombay province, this was amended in 1941 and 46 later. It did not bring additional benefits to the tenants. 4 parts out of 5 that were produced would go to the zamindars towards lease. Illegal extortions and slave-like practices existed. All these led to the inevitability of building a peasant organization at the district level. In the backdrop of all these developments, the first Uttara Kannada District Convention of AIKS was held on 22nd April 1945 at Hiregutti. Shamrao Parlekar, peasant leader from Maharashtra, had presided over this convention. Peasants even came walking to participate in this convention from places that were 40 kilometers away. The convention adopted the red flag as theirs. Resolutions demanding the immediate implementation of Tenancy Act and Peasants' Debt Relief Act were passed. The very next day after the district convention, Karwar Taluk Convention was also held, which was presided over by Parlekar. About 5,000 farmers participated in this convention also. At this point of time, Pulukunda Shivarao, as he is popularly called Niranjana, these 2 stories based on real incidents titled Two Servants and Separated Kin, that is called Agalida Bandava in Kannada, based on peasant struggle. As described by Niranjana in part 1 of his Dwani, a collection of Niranjana's works, the peasant organization under the communist leadership was domineering in 46 and 47 period in Uttara Kannada district. N.L. Upadhyaya, B.N. Dharwadkar, M.S. Saladipur and D.V. Singh led the movement. The local leaders were either Sahib Jogu Purushottam Naik, Ganu Mahabal Naik, Malshekar, Chudo Kaitan and others. Of these, when Haidar Sahib and Purushottam Naik were exiled under Gunda Act, they were taken care of by C.V. Monnaya and Hubli. The Bijapur peasant organization started through students. Students who were staying in Bijapur were in touch with N.K. Upadhyaya and communist leaders. When the students returned to their native places during vacation, they would invite the communist leaders to their villages. The leaders witnessed the prevalence of feudal and semi-feudal rural land relationships and realized the intense wickedness and exploitation of farmers. N.K. Upadhyaya describes as follows the agricultural relationships prevalent then. Quote, administration was done by village headmen, that is Gaudas, the rich heads of districts, it's called Desais, recipients of land gifts, Jahagirdars. These would be on top. Then came the village officials or accountants, that is, they are called Kulakarnis, who were generally Brahmins, who would manipulate peasants' documents. Little papers manipulated in consideration for the, not little, title papers were manipulated in consideration for the wealthy. Also rich money lenders were who would keep people under their control. Real British were the Patels. They were called police patils, also they are called. Those who looked after British officers, well, when they visited the villages, would get generous gifts, inams, in the form of lands in considerable quantity. There was rumor that the leader of a peasants' union, Raja Sahib Dodmane, had more than 100 acres of land for spreading a blanket for the British to sit on when they visited the village. In this manner, some would become the owners of several villages, unquote. So significantly, the students introduced these communist leaders to people described above. The peasant meetings would be held making use of these people. There would be no opposition as long as the leaders' speeches were restricted to the British administration and the issues connected with freedom struggle. The communists dealt with this issue properly in the beginning. Hence, the activities of peasants' unions were not held on the basis of class. There was no opposition to the red flag initially. Bijapur was a district of 5 rivers. In spite of this, the peasants' union with the red flag raised the issues of water scarcity and drought and organized struggles. One of the important peasant struggles in the district of Bijapur pertains to one launched Desai Kashirao of Ganihalli, a village situated on the banks of river Krishna in Bagyawadi Taluk. This man owned lands in 32 villages. At the end of 1945, making use of his hoodlums, he had expelled from Gani more than 100 Muslim and other families. When the Congress did not stand by the people, the Peasants' Union, with the help of students and BD workers of Bijapur, succeeded in getting Desai expelled from the district. Making use of this opportunity, the peasants and Lamani people were organized under the Kisan Sabha banner. During the pre-independence period, the peasant struggles of AAKs under the leadership of communists were restricted mostly to Bombay, Karnataka region. In the case of Dakshin Kannada district, which was part of Madras province, has had the influence of Malabar peasant rising, but it was still an embryo in the womb of freedom and assumes a clear organizational form after 1947. As far as Mysore province is concerned, peasant struggles in the pre-independence period led by communists could be hardly seen. They began after 1950 in this region. Now I shall deal with ASF, how ASF was started and their activities during this period, and I shall try to finish today's lecture by dealing this aspect today. In the fight for freedom at the All India level, an organized student struggle had taken place. As far as Karnataka is concerned, the ASF coordinated struggle can be seen only during the Quit India movement and later. The participation, especially of students influenced by communism, can be seen in this. In the enthusiasm of Friends of Soviet Union had taken birth in Calcutta to oppose fascism. It had been suggested to Savai Ashwath Rao, Secretary of Mysore State Students Federation, which was existing then, that is called Mssf, affiliated to ASF, that a Soviet Aid Day should be observed on the lines of Friends of Soviet Union. The second conference of Mssf was held on 11 January 1941, presided over by Dr. K.B. Krishna, N.D. Shankar, K.B. Krishna. N.D. Shankar, N.S. Chendur, M.S. Ramarao, Savai Ashwath Rao, and S. Ramaswamy were the main organizers. Savai Ashwath Rao was the National Joint Secretary of ASF. He was also the Secretary of Mssf. This conference resolved to organize students against fascism and imperialism and to campaign among students projecting Soviet country as a model government. These resolutions were opposed by 30 students led by K. Prabhakar, President of Indian Samadharma Youth League. They boycotted the conference and walked out. This demonstrates the existence of ideological differences even at that time. The prominent communist leader of Karnataka, M.S. Krishnan, had a leaning towards communism even while studying in Madras. He was active in Madras Students' Organization affiliated to ASF. After graduating in chemistry, he returned to Bangalore in 1941 and joined University Visvesvaraya Engineering College. He then became the Secretary of Bangalore Students' Federation, which was active on the student front. He was elected as the Secretary of MSSF after Savai Ashwath Rao. Although ASF was very much influenced by CPI's policies, it actively participated in the Quit India movement. It resolved a class response to the Quit India call on 9th August 1942. The students of Bangalore Central, Intermediate and Engineering Colleges was led by M.S. Krishnan, while the activities of students comprised Quit India campaign, boycotting and picketing educational institutions. Underground, such as N.D. Shankar, Sukhatirtha and Prabhudev organized violent activities. Gelatin, detonators, safety fuse and such other materials would be stolen from KGF to produce explosives. When H.C. Venugopal, who was a student activist at that time, was proceeding to Davanagere with other students to cut telephone cables, police lathi charged them at Banavara railway station and threw them out. Students who were enraged on hearing the news from the railway station. Some students experienced jail life in this case. Responding to the call of ASF, students undertook signature campaigns for national unity. Students of Bangalore, Mysore, Bhadravati, Kolar and such other places participated in large numbers. Mssf Krishnan played a prominent role in attracting his childhood friend S. Suryanarayan Rao, popularly called Suri, to the student struggle. Y.R. Satyanarayana, B.K. Narsimurthy, M.C. Narsimhan, he was also a great communist leader after that. S.V. Shastri and others were activists of the Students' Federation. Quit India movement was instrumental in drawing a huge sections of students to the struggle. When Gandhiji was arrested, students of Bangalore immediately resorted to a strike. Suri, who had just then completed SSC, was arrested while he was picketing near LMP College. He was in Mysore jail along with more than 1,000 students for 1.5 years. Along with these, there were H.Y. Sharada Prasad, former press secretary of Indira Gandhi, and Dr. H. Narasimhaya, who was a great rationalist who recently died. A well-known Gandhian also. Protests began in the jail for proper breakfast and meal against the views of jail officials. On 27th October 1942, the officials brought the police and ordered a lathi charge within the jail. Suri was also seriously beaten up. Police tried to bring pressure through Suri's elder brother, who was a government servant, to obtain a confessional statement from Suri, but he did not yield. A student of Marimallappa High School in Mysore, who became a victim of police atrocity in jail and died. Around this time, Gauramma, who was active in Mass Awakeners Union earlier, was an active member of ASF in Mysore. A Dalit student by name C. Parvatamma was facing problems of food in her hostel. Gauramma intervened and provided food and shelter to the farmer till her problems were solved. The conduct of Gauramma, a Brahmin, was an important development in those times. Her simple marriage with M.S. Ramalao, who was also a leader of the Mass Awakeners Union and the Communist Party, without involving a priest, had drawn attention. Differences arose between communists and socialists at the All India level pertaining to Quit India movement, as a result of which the Socialists launched All India Students' Congress. This split of ASF had its effect in Bangalore late, and in the annual meeting held on 20th December 1944, AISF got split. It was then decided to organize a convention of Bangalore Students' Federation from 4th to 5th August 1947. But the government banned this convention. Despite the ban being in force, the convention was held in Bangalore. The convention was presided over by N. Krishnan of Progressive Writers Association. He was a very great novelist of Karnataka and a very popular novelist. This process continued and the MSSF state conference was held at Nanjangud in 1945. The convention dealt with not only political but also academic issues. Suri later on became the secretary of Bangalore Student Federation. In 1946, the son of Diwan Arkat Ramaswamy Mudaliyar had been invited to deliver the valedictory address of Central College Students Union. Dayanand Sagar was the secretary of the Students Union. So you must be aware that now the family people connected with Dayanand Sagar family, as now they are having a lot of political clout and they are running engineering colleges and institutions, so many other things. And some of them in their family are also MLAs. This Dayanand Sagar was the secretary of the Students' Union. The Diwan of Mysore was also the Diwan of Travancore province. The Student Federation decided that it was improper to invite the son of a Diwan to deliver the speech when the freedom struggle was at its height. The students rallied to prevent the speech of the Diwan's son. The police and the hoodlums joined to prevent it together to oppressively stop the procession. police arrested Suri and many others. Because of the stiff opposition from students, the Diwan's son could not deliver his speech. As a result of this, some students, including Surinarayan Rao and Ramakrishna Prasad, a relative of K.C. Reddy, former Chief Minister of Karnataka, were expelled from the colleges. ASF continued such activities till the attainment of freedom. It was managing a students' aid society to meet the fee requirement of poor students. Various programs such as music festivals, debates, and sports meets were being organized to raise funds. Handbill campaign had been organized in 46 by ASF to support the postal strike. During 45-47 period, wave of worker struggles that swept Bangalore, students of ASF participated in them to express their fellow feeling and related literature. ASF had convened a meeting of 15th August to discuss the draft constitution to which Kengal Hanumanthayya had been invited. According to Suri, Kengal Hanumanthayya was being called a communist as he would sharply criticize the princely rule of Mysore. In support of the struggle to demand a responsible government in Mysore, students were encouraged to take to the streets and struggle. ASF had begun functioning in Mangalore prior to other places in Karnataka. The first student convention was held in 1939 and was presided over by Dr. B.K. Krishnan, known for his communistic thinking. A. Raghavan was the secretary of ASF's Mangalore unit at that time. District Judge K.P.D. Nair, K. Shankar of Kannanur, K. Padmanabhan of Post and Telegraphs Department, S.S. Shanbag of Coorg, who was an advocate in Mumbai, old-time workers of the Communist Party Adur Shankar Rao, Haridas Achar, and others expounded the leftist trend of thought. They were already in touch with the underground communist struggle. Discussions and resolutions against British imperialism and fascism were the features of students' conventions of that period. Comrades, I shall stop this day of this lecture.
Comrade,
remaining part I would like to continue tomorrow.
Okay. Thanks, Comrade. Comrade, there's one question. Would you like to take it today or?
Yeah, we can take.
It is the contribution of KGF to the struggle.
Yeah, I just little bit I have covered. I think tomorrow's class will cover much more details about KGF struggle. I think tomorrow we can deal with that.
Sure, Comrade. So there's request for the notes. If you could share the notes of the lecture.
Yeah, I can share it, no problem.
Okay. And there's another request about the video recording. We are making arrangements to arrange for the link tomorrow itself, but then we'll get back on that tomorrow. I think that's a better commitment.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think we can wind up the session and we shall meet tomorrow at 6 p.m.
Okay, Comrade. Okay.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Comrade.
We shall meet tomorrow. Thank you.